Welcome back, y'all. This is going to be Unit 2G. This is the free exercise clause applying strict scrutiny. So there's some interesting cases here. The first one is Sherbert v. Verner in 1963. It is a 7-2 reversal of South Carolina Supreme Court ruling, and Justice Brenner delivers the majority opinion. So the context here, excuse me, the context here is that this woman, I don't even remember which one was which, but this woman who is a Seventh-day Adventist, which I don't really know what that is fired by her South Carolina employer because she won't work on Sundays because that's part of her religious tradition. She files for unemployment in South Carolina, and her unemployment is rejected because she, quote unquote, refused to work or refused jobs that she was offered because of her religious tenets. And so she sues under the Free Exercise Clause. And both the district and the South Carolina Supreme Court rule against her, but the Supreme Court overturns it and says that South Carolina has overstepped its bounds. And they say the statute places no restriction upon the appellant's freedom of religion, nor does it in any way prevent her in the exercise of her right and freedom to observe her religious belief in accordance with her dictates. That was the argument of the state of South Carolina. But the Supreme Court basically overrules that. And first, they ask, does disqualification for benefit impose a burden on her free exercise of religion? And they say, yes, it does impose a burden. If the purpose or effect of a law is to impede the observance of one or all religions, or is to discriminate invidiously between religions, that law is constitutionally invalid, even though the burdens may only be characterized as indirect. And then the second question they ask is, does South Carolina have a compelling state interest in enforcing this rule? And again, this time they say no. Even if the possibility of spurious claims did threaten to dilute the fund and disrupt the scheduling of work for employers, it would plainly be incumbent upon the appellees that no alternative forms of regulation would combat such abuses without infringing the First Amendment. And they say that's not the case here. And then finally, they sort of make a big point. They say this is not a case in which an employer's religious convictions serve to make him a non-productive member of society. So they're like, look, if your religion is that you just don't work and you want to collect unemployment, we're not having it. This is a very specific case with a very specific ruling, and we're not trying to sort of, incentivize not working, but in this case, the state did sort of, I'm sorry, my screen's so dirty. In this case, the lower courts shouldn't have ruled the way that they did. Okay, case 2, Wisconsin v. Yoder. This is a 7-0 affirmation of the lower court ruling, and Chief Justice Berger delivers the majority opinion. Yoder and Miller, who brought the case, and also a guy named Yutsky. But Yoder and Miller are what's called Old Order Amish. They're in Wisconsin. And Yutsky is what's called Conservative Amish Mennonite. And basically what happened was they all were more than willing to send their kids to school through 8th grade. But then they wanted their kids to drop out of school and learn to sort of live the communal life, right? The farming, agricultural, building your own barns, or for the women, like cooking and doing the sort of domestic stuff, and so their argument was that, after 8th grade, education becomes more sort of secularized and, it sort of degrades our religious teachings. And so after 8th grade, they refused to send their kids to school. Wisconsin tried them, found them guilty, and fined them $5 each. And this is 1972, so $5 really isn't a lot of money at that time, you know. Um, but they took it to court. They sued under the Establishment Clause, and the court found with the Amish. And their big quote here is that aided by a history of 3 centuries as an identifiable religious sect and a long history as a successful and self-sufficient segment of American society, the Amish in this case have convincingly demonstrated the sincerity of their religious beliefs, the interrelationship of beliefs with their mode of life, the vital role that belief and daily conduct in the continued survival of old order Amish communities and their religious organization, and the hazards presented by the state's enforcement of a statute generally valid as to others. So they're saying, like, Wisconsin can make the vast majority of students go until they're 16, but not in the case of the Amish. And then they say, beyond this, they have carried the even more difficult burden of demonstrating the adequacy of their alternative mode of continuing informal vocational education in terms of precisely those overall interests that the state advances in support of its program of compulsory high school education. And so, because the Amish are providing some alternative vocational training in agriculture, in building, these sorts of things, they are still providing the education that Wisconsin wants and purports to want. And so the Amish can provide their own schooling, and Wisconsin cannot force them to attend high school. All right. The final case is Goldman v. Weinberger in 1987. It is a 5-4 affirmation of the lower court ruling, and Justice Rehnquist, it's a difficult name, delivers the majority opinion. And so Goldman is a Jewish Air Force member who wants to wear his yarmulke while in uniform in the Air Force. And at first, he was hiding it under his, his service cap when he was outside. But then he was asked to testify in a military proceeding, and he wore his yarmulke and was reprimanded for it. And the court basically says, we have a very, very different viewpoint on civilian free speech versus and freedom of religion versus military free speech and military freedom of religion. And they say the military need not encourage debate or tolerate protest to the extent that such tolerance is required of the civilian state by the First Amendment. To accomplish its mission, the military must foster instinctive obedience, unity, commitment, and esprit de corps. The essence of military service is the subordination of the desires and interests of the individual to the needs of the service. And so the state has a much better footing for refusing people their sort of First Amendment religious or speech rights in the military than in civilian society. All right, that's it for this section. I'll see you for the next. Have a great day.